IVM.
If you have a serious construction problem, if you have a problem with your building, your house, you go and get a good contractor. But here I am today talking with a very different kind of contractor who you call when there is a problem in one of the most important place, which is your heart. I'm very, very excited to have a good friend, none other than Dr. Aashish Contractor. This is the contractor everybody should know and should be on your speed dial. And the reason is because he's the head of Department of Rehabilitation and Sports Medicine at Sir H.N. Reliance Foundation Hospital. He's the man who has controlled and managed and cured heart problems of a number of people, both super famous and super normal. And I'm here today talking to you about how people can change their life and change their heart. So welcome to the show, Doctor.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Vishal. Always a pleasure chatting with you and catching up with all the new ideas that you have. And I'm sure this is going to be an interesting conversation.
No, absolutely. And we were just saying that you were among the first people I met way back in 2014, talking about my whole new crazy startup. And the most funny part is how we met. I mean, that story is so
bizarre.
Unreal. So do you want to talk about that story?
Yeah, sure. So I can't remember off the top of my head who had introduced us, but essentially we exchanged emails.
I think it was DJ. DJ at ProCap.
That's right. You're right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we exchanged these emails, and ultimately, you live and work out of Chembur, and I was living in Colaba and working out of BKC, and we figured that one of the places we could meet was in Churchgate. And in Churchgate, in the Eros Theatre building, there's a gym on the first floor. It's called QI, though the actual pronunciation is Chi, but
you call it Chi.
We used to call it Ki. And I've been the medical director of it, kind of from its inception, helped them set it up to make it more medical as opposed to a fitness-related gym. And we met there, and I'm not sure whether I knew the name of your company. I don't think I did, because then I would tell you, it's this. And when we met there, we met at the coffee shop below. I think there was there is a cafe coffee day there. And when he told me the company is Go Ki, it was completely bizarre. I mean, what are the odds that I could be part of a organization called Ki, and then I meet this guy who we're looking to collaborate with, whose organization is called Goki.
No, it is completely unreal for me too, because, as I said, we had never heard, when we created the word Goki, we were like, This is very unique, and here we are ending up at Ki, and exactly spelt with the same way.
Yeah.
But, coming back to that whole experience, I think one thing which literally struck me in a big way is I was always used to seeing doctors in clinics and hospital setups with white gowns and very serious. And here you were on this amazing gym. That Ki gym is one of the best gyms I've ever seen. They have the best equipment, and you were talking about combining the whole idea of exercise and health and medicine, and this is like way before your time. So did people think you were crazy? Because it's all said, if you have a heart problem, don't walk,
past tense,
don't do
even
this,
present, but
don't do that. And you are like telling people, no, if you have a heart problem, you can exercise, you can do gymming, you can even run marathons to heart patients. How was it initially taken?
So, the story actually goes that when I went to the US, I went to study what in my head was traditional sports medicine, right? So if you say sports medicine, you imagine people specifically working with athletes. And when I went there after a few months, I realized that the field of sports medicine also encompassed several what I may call sub-areas. So, for example, sports psychology or nutrition. We could look at, they have this whole concept of exercises medicine, cardiac rehabilitation. And over time, a little bit of my interest veered towards the, if I may use the word, the physiological aspects of sports medicine. So using exercise to actually heal or take care of a lot of illnesses, especially chronic illnesses. So in the year, at the end of 2000, when I decided to come back to India, this concept of cardiac rehabilitation in what I may call a formal sense didn't exist. I mean, many people could say
even
that
now it doesn't exist for a lot of people. Right?
It doesn't. So I remember literally knocking on a lot of doors and kind of trying to convince people, because here you got to convince not just the patients, which is the secondary part, but the first is the doctor, the hospital administration to set up something which really doesn't exist. And I had all the data and all of that to show. So it was interesting. Started the process at Kambala Hospital. Dr. Shetty, who has relatively recently passed away, was to be honest fairly progressive and gave some space and
this dedicated. Was in 2001.
So this was at the end of 2000. I was here, and then we started the conversations and the work, and I think we started work towards I think it was exactly August 2001. And then at that same time, somebody I met, his name was Nitij, and Nitij was, humongously overweight, and he had lost a ton of weight in what I may call the right manner.
And Nitij, of course, is the guy who now owns the Key Clinics.
Exactly,
right? Yeah.
Exactly. So he wanted to set up a fitness place center, not being a traditional gym, but with doing the right stuff, if I might say so. So I've been associated with the American College of Sports Medicine right from the beginning, and I've been there what's called a certification director. So he wanted me to train his staff in a so-called medical manner, such that the gym would serve clients not just to get buff and fit and to look good on Saturday night, but to actually impact their health. And that's really the genesis of Key, and that's where it started. And yeah, so that's how the whole journey started.
I think, clearly, right? I mean, in 2001, you were talking about this, and you said that this was a relatively new thing. So now coming and convincing a doctor, what were the experience of the first few patients? Because, here you're telling a heart patient to go on a treadmill and do all these kinds of things. How was that experience?
Yeah, so that's interesting. So the first, actually, if I think about it, the patients were quite very receptive. So it was wonderful. In that relatively small room in Kambala Hill, we used to have Gujarati ladies from Walkeshwar coming in their complete saris, because they would refuse to sort of leave home, in anything else, and then kind of getting into a salwar kameez, which was a big step, for them, and then getting on the treadmill or getting on a cycle, and they actually loved it. The thing that we do, I mean, whether it's back then or even now, and that's really important, you need to start gradually. You can't get a person from zero and tell them to, run for 10 minutes or something. You literally start from zero, and you just make it comfortable. Say, let's just walk. And they say, we've never walked before. And they say, that's fine. Let's take the first few steps. And it always starts in that manner. And the patients are surprisingly receptive. I really, till date, I mean, people are skeptical. Oh, they have this, I won't be able to do it. But the moment they say, I won't be able to do it, you show them 5 other people who seem to be worse off than them doing it. And that's all it takes, because I think human beings need that. They just need to know it can be done. That's all.
And I just want to kind of fast forward a little. And of course, your book is almost a Bible, The Hard Truth, talking about, and you have an entire chapter talking about reversal of heart disease, turning back the clock. So while you were at one point of time talking about, post-heart disease, we'll try and help you manage, to now saying reversing heart disease. I mean, how have we kind of reached these two ends of the spectrum?
Okay, so that's interesting. So this concept, the phrase reversal of heart disease, ideally actually should be credited to Dr. Dean Ornish in the US. He had
By the way, I know Dean Ornish really well. I've even been to his hospital in this beautiful suburb in Sausalito.
I worked there.
It was so amazing. He's such a great guy.
So exactly. So Dean Ornish first wrote this, reversing heart disease book. And when I was in the US and I was, studying, I said I must, go and look at. So he was looked at a bit of a outlier even within the medical community, right?
He's the guy who kind of helped Bill Clinton and, the whole plant-based diet.
That's right. So he, before I returned, I said I must. So I went and did about, I think it was a 2-month internship in Sausalito. And,
that's like, you're almost like in Italy, right?
Absolutely.
That place is so
that's
beautiful.
a nice description. You go past the Golden Gate Bridge and then you sort of veer off, and that's Sausalito. And so spent 2 months there, and also spend time at his retreat. So he does it at this, I think it's called the Claremont Club in Oakland.
Yeah, he's invited me for one of those retreats.
Correct, yeah. And then the time, in fact, that I did it, Larry King of CNN was supposed to have been there, but, he last minute couldn't make it or something. And so he had the retreat. So we kind of, I saw his methodology and saw what was considered the traditional methodology. And the concept of reversal actually is interesting. If you do all the right things, and that's what I've written in the book, you get what's called physiological reversal. In other words, you can halt the progression of disease and you can prevent somebody from having a heart attack, which is ultimately what you want.
No, and he also says that the arteries could actually declog.
A little bit, Vishal. So there is where the controversy is, and it's a bit of a stretch because, once that plaque is formed and is very solid, it may not sort of just, it's not like Drano throwing down your, drain and it just sort of, disappearing. It doesn't happen in that manner because it's a very solid plaque. But it does, it can shrink a little bit. But more important, the plaques are like dormant volcanoes, which can be there for, years and decades and nothing can happen, or they can explode or, take off one day.
And
so
then
as
one
long
clot can come out.
Absolutely. So as long as we keep them dormant, that's what in a way reversal is. So reversal is sometimes a much used and abused term, which is why I didn't want to have that as sort of the specific title of the book. But if you understand the concept well, yes, reversal can happen.
No, but I think that's the most important part of this book, right?
Yeah.
While everything is great.
Yeah.
So in India right now, the problem is that everybody has accepted the fact that they're going to have heart disease. So nowadays when you meet people, it's not like, oh, yeah, I will have a heart problem. Everybody has heart problems. So people have assumed
it's
that,
a badge of honor now,
that at a particular age, I'll get diabetes. At a particular age, I'll get blood pressure. And at a particular age, I will have a heart problem.
Right.
And usme kya, everybody says, I'll put a stunt, I'll do, So people talk of all these conditions and angioplasty like they're doing, a root canal.
Going for a movie or something.
So the problem right now is that people have, instead of saying that I will make sure I never go to a place where I have a heart problem, people are talking of, oh, it's nothing big here. I have this friend who just had a thing. He went and in 1 hour they did his angiography and then usi mein they did the angioplasty. So how do you kind of take this position of prevention when this is where the market is?
So actually what you bring forward is a very interesting point. So Indians as a whole also tend to be very fatalistic. कि जो होगा यहाँ लिखा है. So they've actually done studies in Indian population in the West, which is largely done in places like England or in the US or in Canada, and they found that even things like diabetes, to which Indians are unfortunately highly prone, and we're the diabetes capital of the world. The Indian population there, compared to the peer Western population, took less care of their diabetes, were more, if I can use a Bombaya term, bindas about eating stuff and all of it.
Ram Bharose everything.
Ram Bharose, because they said ये भगवान ने दिया है.
Yeah.
ये जो हमारा नसीब में है. So you bring out an interesting point where if they accept that heart disease is going to happen, they're going to do less to fight it. So the kind of work that you're doing, which is fabulous of in that kind of preventive space, is harder for people to accept, and they may enter it in more from a exercise or fad thing as opposed to prevention. But that's the road that they all should be on.
No, but
that's the challenge.
The point is, for example, what Dr. Aashish talks about, and coincidentally, I may be actually meeting him next week. I'm off to Vancouver. So he comes almost every year for the TED conference, so we kind of hang out together. So he talks about this plant-based diet, plant-based.
Right.
Now in India, we have a huge population who's vegetarian.
Yes.
So they are technically on a plant-based diet.
Absolutely.
But the problem is the excess carbohydrates and the fried food.
Correct.
So what is the perfect Indian plant-based diet? Because in India we can't live like, salads and ye sab kha ke, you can't survive. So I know you talk a little bit about the food also.
Yeah. So diet is fascinating, and the good or the bad news is for diet, everybody has an opinion and it's all very strong because everybody has, everybody loves food. Here are one or two simple things that I believe. Firstly, I'm not a big fan of magic food or poison foods. Okay, so I think all foods can be good in the right quantity, and they
so
can
have you
be.
met Dr. Gundry, who talks about this crazy food? So Dr. Gundry has this book where he talks about food which are actually poisonous for you and you should not be eating.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about Dr. Gundry later.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. So the interesting part is, right, and fortunately or unfortunately, I approach these more from a scientific angle as opposed to an emotional angle, because when you get tied down to a philosophy, then even in the face of evidence against it, you kind of have to fight for that philosophy. So I think what has been found is that from a food perspective, and this is really interesting. So on the one end, in many ways, the Ornish diet is an extreme on the one end of being very, very low fat and high in carbohydrate, and especially talks about complex carbohydrate, though I think he's mellowed that stance a bit over the years. And on the other extreme, you got the Dr. Atkins diet, which essentially says that, carbohydrate is poison. Which keto is essentially Atkins.
Thing,
and now you've got people like Tim Noakes in South Africa getting onto that same concept. So there they talk about that fat is the best thing in the world and the carbohydrate is the worst. And studies have been done and found that, as long as people followed the diet, both worked.
Both worked.
So the bottom line is, most of us like to follow a little bit of every diet, the part that appeals to us. So we end up having literally the Indian term khichdi of diets. But if you stuck to a diet, however crazy or radical it might sound, it works. And one of the main reasons why it works is ultimately any diet, which is a very, how shall I put it, strict diet, is ultimately restrictive. Okay, so if you look at the Ornish diet, while it's saying eat anything plant-based, what it's saying is you can't have butter or cream or those things in any large quantity. And while the Atkins diet is saying, eat all the stuff you like, have cheese and have butter all day long, but have butter without the bread. Have a burger without the bread patties, without the fries. So ultimately it's being restrictive. If you're going to follow a restrictive diet to the T, you're going to consume less food.
Calorie.
And you will largely, you will lose weight. And because you lose weight, the body tends to correct itself. Things like sugar, your cholesterol, all of that start becoming better. So that's why I end up saying there really isn't any magic. Follow a plan. And as you correctly pointed out, in the Indian context, following a plant-based diet isn't a hard thing to do. Just a question of how to bump up the proteins a little more.
There are people listening here, they already have a heart-related issue, let's say high cholesterol, or somebody has already gone through a stent, etc. So what are the 5 things or 6 things they could do which could help them reverse this?
So again, what I'm going to tell you is unfortunately just plain common sense stuff which your listeners probably already know. So I'm not able to give you any magic. And here's the thing, right? If you want to remember it, I don't know, sometimes people remember it as A, B, C, D, E. I give them a little bit of acronym, which may be easy. So A is for activity, which is different from exercise. Okay, so, and here's the kicker. Most people by now know that they should, walk 30, 50, 60 minutes a day, right? Whether you have
10,000 steps, as we say.
10,000 steps, right? So you need to be, you're walking. But where people make a mistake is they don't tend to be physically active. And in our country, it's a classic, right? The classic blue-collar, white-collar worker syndrome. The high-end executive will go to a fancy gym for 45 minutes, but the rest of the 23 hours and 15 minutes, someone's literally driving him to the washroom also. Okay, at work, he's got all the executive. At home, he's got the staff to help him. The car comes literally to the doorsteps, drop, right? So he's got a good structured exercise, but zero physical activity. The guy who's the blue collar, the peon in the office, is getting up at 4:35, standing in line for water, going to Virar station, getting in, going to Churchgate, wherever, getting off, walking to VT, walking to Nariman Point, walking up and down within the day, but he doesn't do the 40 to 60 minutes brisk walk continuously. You look at him, he'll probably say, "You're crazy, I've been walking all day long." So that's a lot of physical activity, no exercise. So you need both, right? So that's A is for your activity. B would be blood pressure. So just make sure your blood pressure is within reason. Ideal pressure is around 120/80. It should not be more than 140 on the upper or 90 on the lower side. Then we got C, which is your cholesterol. So there again, there are a bunch of different values, good, you're bad, etc. But if you want to remember just one simple value, your total cholesterol, keep it, maybe below 200. D is for diabetes. So make sure your sugars are under good control. D is also for do not smoke. So when we talk about lifestyle modification, we always use the word moderation. You don't need to get overboard on anything. But the one area where we say moderation is not okay, it's smoking.
Smoking is zero.
Yeah.
You
So
should.
I've written that in my book. So you often get patients who come and ask you, but, doctor, I smoke, 10 a day, I'm going to reduce it to 3, 4. Isn't that okay? And I look at them straight in the face and say, yeah, that's okay. But it's like asking me, should I jump off the 10th floor of a building or should I jump off the 5th floor? Yes.
That's a very good way of putting it.
Yeah, jump off the 5th floor.
And
but
now
you're
suddenly
probably
people
gonna
are
die.
doing this vaping and they're like, oh, because I'm vaping. I said, listen, it's still, smoke going into your lungs, whether you vape or you
the
smoke.
first time I heard vape, I thought, am I hearing correctly? What did this just say? And then actually for the book, I wrote about vaping in the book. And that is the time it just was becoming an in thing. And yes, that's
vaping
not
is
good enough.
equally bad.
Yeah, so that's your ABCD, and the last one is E is for your structured exercise aspect of it. So if you take care of your risk factors, okay, all the things which end up causing the problem, you're going to reduce your risk. Does that mean your risk becomes zero? No. Yeah. And that's where this whole fitness and immunity bit comes, right? So you're into running. I've seen you with your long socks on early morning on Marine Drive and hitting the thing. So there, and unfortunately, every time something happens to a fit person or a runner, people go...
Oh, there are stories everywhere in your headlines.
Right?
Marathon runner finishes run. And
yeah, absolutely. So I tell people, and especially when I'm talking to a running audience, that running or fitness does not give you immunity. Let's get that straight. It reduces risk, but it doesn't give you immunity. So don't be completely, people think that, because you run, nothing can happen. That's not true.
No, and we are going to talk a lot about the running itself, but I want to kind of first focus on the prevention or reversal of heart disease.
Yeah, so you just follow these, basic lifestyle changes, regular exercise, the right diet, not smoking, once a year looking at your cholesterol, sugars, blood pressure, and being born lucky and not having parents with heart disease. That's, of course, something you can't control.
Does that play a big role?
It actually does. It does. Heart disease is amongst the diseases where there is genetic predisposition. Now, because your parents might have suffered, it just means you've been dealt, slightly not those great cards in life, but it's not a fait accompli. That just because someone's had something, you have to have it.
Because, one of the things which when I was speaking to some folks, they were like, the average lifetime expectancy previously was 45, 50 years.
Yeah.
Now that the life expectancy has increased, this is why we are now seeing all these complications. I mean, your great-grandparents never had heart disease because they never survived before when they were 50 or 60.
Yeah, I hear that a lot, but what also happens is they don't even know, अरे वो तो गांव में थे, वो तो off हो गए एक दिन. But the guy probably died of heart disease. It just wasn't diagnosed as such. So it's not that they weren't dying, they were just not put that label on it.
Because my problem is that people always blame genetics. They always blame something else for their disease. They are not blaming the food they are eating or everything else, right? And I want to kind of make this point here that the genes maybe contribute 10%, but 90% is everything else. I think that's the...
Yeah, it's like saying genes sort of, load the gun, but lifestyle the trigger which sort of fires it off. It's not my code. It's been sort of said often. And it's always the nature versus nurture debate. And I put it this way, that beyond the point, you can't control your genes, right? That's what you've been born with. But there's the whole science of epigenetics as well, which shows that the lifestyle you lead can, I don't want to be misquoted here, but sort of modify your genes or affect the genes in a positive manner. So, and that's the card you have in your hand, and you might as well play it the best you can.
No, but the problem of this whole gene thing is, and I've done all these gene testing, it says, you have 2.1% chance more than normal for this.
It doesn't... What do you do with the data?
It's not actionable, right? It is not actionable at all.
Gene science is still very, very early. Maybe there's a breakthrough, maybe 1 year from today, maybe 10 years from
with
today.
CRISPR and whatever they're doing with gene editing.
The only sort of few genes, like the BRCA gene, the BRCA, which Angelina Jolie had the thing of, and she had the mastectomy. There are some diseases where genes are, the science is getting more accurate in cause and effect. But within cardiovascular disease, they've literally identified hundreds of SNPs, what they call single nucleotide polymorphisms, variations, which mean nothing.
Absolutely. So I think the one thing which I'm sure everybody asks you is, how can I reverse heart disease? We talked about that. The second thing which I think people are now always trying to get into is, how do we prevent this?
Yeah.
And do you think prevention and reversal is more or less the same? Or?
Yes, it's the same continuum, right? I often tell people that, when you talk also in medicine, you got something called primordial prevention, primary prevention, and secondary prevention, right? From sort of traditional epidemiology. So primordial is preventing the risk factor from happening in the first place. So you prevent blood pressure, you prevent sugar. Primary is you preventing the event from happening. You prevent the heart attack from happening. And secondary is after you had a heart attack, what do you do to prevent the next one? I often joke with people the difference between primary and secondary is 5 minutes. The human being remains the same. If you're healthy, if you're okay today and you have a heart attack tonight, tomorrow you're not a totally different person. Your lifestyle, your food is all the same. So it's just a continuum of care that one needs to take. And you can never start too early. People get shocked when I tell them, if you especially have got it, you can test children for cholesterol as early as 12, 13, 14, because this doesn't happen overnight. So it's an interesting thing. They did autopsies in young American kids who died in Korea. I think that was the 50s, the Korean War, as well as in Vietnam. And they found that young soldiers as young as 19, 20, when they did the autopsy and the pathology reports, they had advanced blockages, atherosclerosis at that age, right? So you're unfortunately never too young to suffer.
But today the problem is that we hear of so many cases of 30-year-olds, 29-year-olds, 28-year-olds just collapsing and dying with heart disease, right? It is so common now. Pehle, you used to hear this was much rarer. It was a disease always associated with
older
people
age.
who are older. But today there are 25-year-old people having heart problems. So why is this trend happening? Why are you seeing this?
So, to be honest, 25 one does, let me put it this way.
For 30s, let's say 30s.
Yeah, 30s is fairly common. No, why I say for the 25? Because often the 25-year-old may have something else. They don't have what's called traditional heart disease.
They have a ball or something
exactly,
else.
Or a structural defect, a congenital defect, and we sort of club it all under one big bucket of.
So I was told that there's either an electric problem or a plumbing problem in the heart.
Very good. I hope you read the book, but that's what I said in the. No wonder.
I was quoting your book. So that's a very good way of putting it.
I know at least one person has read it, and Anusha told me that she has. I don't know whether she's just being nice to me, but she did say that she has.
But that's a very good way of looking at it, right? The kind of heart problem. People say, cognitive defect and that defect and that, and we're like, listen, how do you simplify it?
Yeah. So I say, heart is like a house, right? So you can have a structural problem, you can have a plumbing problem, you can have an electrical problem, you can have mechanical problems, and that kind of sums it up. So younger. What's happening is lifestyles are changing. Food is more processed. Physical activity is at a much lower level. Stress is the big elephant in the room, which is I don't know. I'm kind of almost unsure in my own head the role it plays in a lot of people. The problem with stress is we can't measure it.
But stress increases cortisol. So
right?
Cortisol is the...
But correct. But what is it, right? So I can tell you that your sugar is 124 as an example. I can't tell you your stress is 8 or 9 or 10. The other thing is stress per se is not necessarily a bad thing, right? Take yourself, for example. You're obviously a very high-functioning individual. You've achieved a lot in your life at a young age. So you're a driven guy. So you need stress to perform. Just living in this city, you need stress to get out of the door every day and kind of, make a living, right? So stress per se is not bad. We often say when stress becomes problematic, stress becomes distress, that's when it's an issue. And what people perceive as stress is different, right? Again, an example I give in the book. Let's say, a poor domestic worker going home and, a 50 rupee note falls from his pocket. He probably may not sleep very well that night because he's lost 50 rupees if his daily wages were, 100 or 150 rupees, right? While if that happened to you, if I might say so, I don't think that you're going to lose too much sleep with losing 50 rupees. But what if the stock market dropped 400 points? That domestic worker would sleep very, very peacefully that night, while if you were invested, you might not get sleep. So the issue is the same, the 50 rupee or the stock market, but how you perceive it. And stress and heart disease have almost or depression and heart disease have a chicken and egg sort of a thing. Does stress,
it's a cocktail.
Yeah, does depression and anxiety and what we call psychosocial factors, they lead to heart disease. At the same time, having heart disease leads to all of these things. Another sort of elephant in the room in our country is pollution. More and more they're finding out that the environment and the pollution contributes. But again, it's very hard to actually quantify it. Yeah. So I think these are the new ones, stress, pollution, etc., which are adding to the already loaded genetic milieu.
Just to kind of give you a story of my own, right? So my father got diabetes in his early 30s.
Okay.
And I have seen literally how that diabetes started with a normal diabetes, then it became type 2 with insulin, then he was on insulin, but then that started leading to blood pressure, all of that. Then he had his first heart attack, second heart attack, and unfortunately last year when he had a heart attack, it had led to multiple organ failure and so on. So I saw the entire story play out in my house. And one thing which when literally I was in my school is I said I'll never have diabetes at least, because that seems to be the starting point of all of this. And so far, I can tell you that I don't remember the last time when I put sugar in any of this. Like I don't have sugar in anything. I don't drink cold drinks. I've just been off this for years. I don't know the taste of added sugar. I mean, if there is sugar, I can have juices, etc. But that was an event in my life which kind of created such a big impact to me. Yeah. But why are people who are seeing all these things happen, right? There are so many people dying and getting impacted of heart disease. Why are they not waking up to this?
Your guess is as good as mine. So, I'm sorry to have heard that he went through all of this, but that was your wake-up call. And I wonder if that has also an impact on the work that you do today.
No, absolutely right.
So, again, in medicine, when you deal with people, it's very interesting. I mean, I think working in a hospital is so interesting to see human nature unfold in front of you. You have three large groups of people. You got the type who are very blasé, and again, to use the word bindas about anything. They're the sort who'll have had a heart attack a week ago or a bypass surgery 2 weeks ago, and they talk to you as if, जिसने कुछ ज़्यादा कुछ हुआ नहीं, कुछ prevention के लिए ऐसा किया. They're the types who at the smallest cough or cold will, go upside down and get paranoid. And then there are the people in between. So I think a lot of people are just either, accepting it or in denial. It's amazing how when the evidence is there in front of you.
So one of the things I did now, so it's now been almost 4 years. I take a blood test every 3 months.
Okay.
Almost, actually, I did it every 2 months. Now it's almost every 3 months.
Yeah.
And I measure every parameter of mine.
Yeah.
And I can now tell you that I can exactly tell you which was my last parameter, which was problematic and which I am working on. So I can go to that level. So right now, all my parameters touchwood are under control. My uric acid was slightly higher. That is what I'm working on. There was a time when my THS was a little off limit. My HDL was low. I was put on having extra virgin coconut oil. So I'm having it twice every day. And that one thing is now in my last report bumped up my HDL.
Yeah.
So I'm literally seeing that how food. So I just kind of change my food and then keep taking blood tests. Yeah. And I'm seeing how it is literally like magic, right? That all this, the food impacts all your thing.
No, it does. And you're using your body as a experiment study of one. But so, and that's also interesting because there are, like in weighing yourself, right? There are people who weigh themselves every day and people who don't want to look at the scale even once in 6 months. So I think, what works. So if this is what works for you, that's great. And I'm glad to know I'm not the only anal person around. I can tell you how many steps I took dating back to 2008 on any given day on my Excel sheet. And I kid you not, that's a fact.
I've seen that Excel sheet.
I've got my... You will scoff at it, but this old-fashioned diary, so which you can see at the end of every day, I've got how many steps I've written down, and I convert it from my now. I've sold out and got a Fitbit and changed from the old-fashioned pedometer.
And we need to get that to a Goki now.
That is true.
Is completely
the moment I said the word out of my mouth, I realized that I'm going to have to retract this one. But yes, so I do that, and I think anything that is measured can be changed. Mm-hmm. So,
what cannot be measured cannot be managed, right? That's the other way to look at it.
Absolutely.
The Vishal Gondal Show will be right back after this break.
Long, long ago, not in Bethlehem, but in a place nearby, there was a wonderful birth of a huge show, which I like to call Cyrus Says. A show that encapsulates everything in human history, from the first Homo sapien to the last Homo sapien. Who's traversed the entire world and then come back to India. This is a show which tells you everything about everything. If you want to know, avoid Google, come to us. It's called Cyrus Says. Get new episodes every Monday and Thursday on the IVM Podcast app, website, or wherever you get your podcasts from. It's simple as A, B, oh God, what comes after that?
Cyrus Says is brought to you by Setu IMAX.
But, so stress is a problem. We know that the whole problem of nutrition is one. There is alcoholism and the culture. There is smoking.
Yeah.
What are the other X factors which you are seeing now, which are being more recent? Which, are you seeing like stress, especially people in companies and, all these places, which is happening?
So, I don't know how to answer that, because on the other hand...
The corporate environment really...
So I talk to a large group of people on a very regular basis, both in a corporate setting and even in more sort of smaller 8, 10, 12 people setting. And there is a lot more awareness actually today. So especially when I talk to some of these, EO or YPO, entrepreneurs organization or young presidents organization, that type of a crowd, that they are very clued in, and everybody is, counting steps and measuring things and, onto some kind of a fitness plan. And even if you go to the large groups, they're all saying the right things. So I don't know whether they're just not implementing it. But today there are very few people who, for example, smoke and are proud of it in the 30 plus kind of corporate crowd that you see. But in the younger college crowd, I think maybe that's still, if I may use the word, in to do that. And I think binge drinking has caught up. I believe that kids are drinking even in the 10th standard parties, and that's like a cool thing to do. The other, and this is just an observation, there's no scientific basis, I think young girls are smoking a lot more now. I would almost say more than the boys. And again, I'm not trying to be sexist one way or the other about this, but
this
it's
is
just
what we are seeing in the society.
It's just an observation, and statistically, the rate of smoking, not tobacco consumption in Indian women is high, but smoking is very, very, very low. It's among the lowest in the world on any tobacco survey. But again, my observation, you go out to a Phoenix Mills type area or a Kamla Mill, any night spot kind of an area, and you see a large number of young girls smoking. Now, I don't know whether that's a new phenomenon or
I think
what.
another thing which you have been very closely associated with is the Mumbai Marathon. You've been literally the medical director of the marathon now for, I think, ever since it started.
Yeah,
or
from its inception till 2014.
And now, of course, you are continuing to help them. I know that,
Yeah.
But I mean, how did this whole, I remember the first marathon would have like a few hundred participants to now being one of the largest marathons in the world or in Asia. I don't know what scale.
Yeah, so in terms of the number of total people running on that day, it would be in the world category. Of course, they're divided into 3 distances.
Yeah, the half marathon is maybe 25,000-30,000 now.
One. So, I got to give credit to Procam and Anil and Vivek, and it's just a phenomenal story. And I give them credit because from day one, they wanted to do it right, if I might say so. So I remember very vividly, they'd approached Asian Art, and they had met Dr. Panda, who's effectively the CEO and the lead and the founder of the hospital, and he had called me in for that meeting. So this was 2004. January was the first time it was meant to be held, and because of some technical reason they shifted it to Feb. So I think they came to us in 2003 June or July. So we started the conversation and planning almost 7 months before. And they really, did everything right: the medical, the hydration, the branding, getting international people in, and it's just phenomenal how that one event has changed the face of running, and I would say health in the future of the country.
Absolutely.
I
got initiated into it.
It is incredible. Marathon. I went with my dad to Mount Abu, that's his birthplace, last year in November, and small hill station Mount Abu, and there was a Mount Abu half marathon happening, or it just happened the weekend, I go to Coimbatore for a conference, Coimbatore marathon's happening. There isn't any mid-level town in this country which doesn't have at least one half marathon in the year.
It's become an epidemic, which is a good epidemic.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's great. And this again is the story of seeing is believing and one person affecting another. So in the first year in the half marathon, I think there were, again, like I said, probably less than 2,000 or 3,000 people. But when over the years people saw their neighbors do it, oh, he's older than me and bigger in size than me and he can do it, then why can't I? So it's all a sense of, somebody can do it, and it's spawned a great culture. So I think great credit to the event.
Organizing the medical help for this, right? That's always, and I know that every day after the marathon there are these stories of people dying. So how have you managed this, right? How do you manage the 22,000 people?
Yeah,
and their
so
health?
I mean, on race day on this kind of big event, you probably have about 400 to 500 people working in association with you. My biggest worry has always been making sure that those 400 or 500 people are in their place at 4:30 a.m. because after that the road starts shutting. And in a city like Mumbai, the roads are particularly narrow, so logistics sometimes become harder. And to me, the communication is the hardest part, because when somebody has, unfortunately collapsed, you need to kind of get to them really quickly, and you need to be able to communicate very quickly. So you keep trying to do your best in this. I think having event-free runs is a combination of preparedness and, let's be honest, luck as well has to play a role, because sometimes things go horribly wrong and you're just not in a position to do anything. But I'd like to think that the Mumbai Marathon is a well-prepared, a well-equipped marathon. I know that a lot of the runs, sometimes in other parts of the country, I think the organizers, especially doing it in the first year or second year, do not tend to take the medical aspect as seriously as they maybe should. But hopefully all of that's changing.
No, but I mean, I've done like 14 half marathons. Of course, I'm not too fast. But I realize that, if you feel uneasy, you stop.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how are these people, I still don't understand that. How are these people who are running and they complete and then in 15 minutes they get a heart attack? Don't they get any symptoms when they're running? I mean, what kind of keeps making them going?
So there are 2-3 things to it. One is there are a group of people who, for lack of a better word, I'll say, end up doing silly things on race day, right? So there will be people, and again, this is all from personal experience. They'll say, oh, I will run the full marathon without having a single sip of water, for example.
Oh, God.
Right? And in our weather,
hydration.
When it's, 30 degrees plus by the time you finish and the humidity, that's just silly. There are people, oh, I have not trained for the last 3 months, but I've done it once before. Chale, race day pe jayenge, dekha jayenge. We'll go as far as we can, then we'll stop. What's the big deal, right? And then they push themselves. There are people who had fever or something and they run with it. So people are also putting themselves in harm's way. Having said that, there are people, and that's the sad reality which is very hard for all of us to accept, including me, since I'm a runner myself, and I feel very strongly. You could really be completely healthy and there are body changes going on and at the end of the run or after you finish, that a cascade of events takes place which sets your heart into a dangerous rhythm, into a cardiac arrest rhythm, and that time nothing can be done. Sometimes people finish the run and then abruptly stop. When you stop abruptly, again, all your blood, which has been flowing very fast, pools down into your lower limbs, into your legs, and that again sets off a cascade of events. So, it's not... So there are both sides. There are people who do get warning signs which they tend to ignore, but there is a small
And I know there's this famous WhatsApp which comes every time, which is the CEO of SAP, I think Ranjan.
Yeah, that just, I've written about Ranjan's story also. And that is, again, that's one of those things.
And they talk about sleep. They say sleep is a...
That was a long time ago, and every time it comes around as if it happened last week, So sleep, again, and that's a good sort of third point in relation with stress and pollution that I spoke about. Sleep, again, is the unknown kind of a thing. We know that sleep is important. But, often what tends to happen is people are traveling a lot, they're not sleeping well, they're kind of not eating right, and the perfect storm happens. So ultimately, for a catastrophe to happen, lots of bad things have to line up up together, and that's that perfect storm. So I don't know his individual story, but maybe that was the perfect storm lined up. So I think sleep is important. Everything, all of these things are important. But I think when a lot of these WhatsApp and all tend to trivialize things into a manner that this is the only thing that matters.
When
you take care of this, nothing else matters.
So normally there are people dying every day of heart disease, but the marathon mein something happens and people make a big deal out of it, right?
Absolutely, that you hit the nail on the head. And I tell people that while it is when something bad happens to somebody while running, of course it makes news and is startling, but you know what? Lots of bad things happen to people sitting home watching TV. You rarely will see a headline saying person at home watching TV, collapse. So, it does have a larger emotional tug, and and whenever things go wrong and the press even calls me, I request them to try and give a very balanced view to the whole.
Press wants to sensationalize a lot of this news, right?
A balanced view to the whole story. Okay, so there are lots of things which one does need to take care of. So one shouldn't be negligent either way. You shouldn't have an attitude that nothing can ever happen, and that end, or the other end, that this is all bad and nobody must ever do it. So that's the balance.
Exactly. But I think you have now done something which is even more extreme, right? And I remember meeting Venkat, who's you got these 60-year-olds, 60 plus, and all these people had bypass surgeries, open heart, and all kinds of things. And you started training them for running half and full marathons. And I know you started with a few, and now there are literally hundreds of people in that group. So how can this crazy thing happen? I mean, here we are talking of people dying of heart disease, and then you are taking people at a senior age and making them run marathons. How is that possible? You need to tell me.
So,
is there a magic pill somewhere there?
No, Baba, there is no magic pill. That's the sad part. So here's the deal. A lot of, I actually, tell people half jokingly, half seriously that these guys, who had this and they're doing it, on race day, they are the safest group.
The safest group?
Because we know they've had a problem. We've addressed the problem. We're monitoring them and then doing everything right. While on the other hand, you have hundreds of, if I may use the phrase, walking time bombs, people who've not taken care, ignored symptoms, smoking away and going out and doing things.
They don't,
in a sense, they're the more dangerous, right? So I think it all started with them doing the dream run. 2004 was the first year, and we had about 25 of them doing the dream run. And then it was a logical...
So this was 25-year-old post-heart surgery.
Yes.
You made them did the 6-kilometer dream run.
Yes, It was the first year was 7 kilometers.
7 kilometers. And what did people say? Ki aap pagal hain, aap
they did. So I remember so clearly. Times of India had done a lovely, big article, and they're taking pictures of these guys, and they're taking them one or two with their shirt off to show the scar. And it was quite amusing. And I'm happy to tell you that same group, a lot of the initial cohort of 25 are still doing it today.
Wow.
Okay, they're still doing it today. And so then it was that logical progression. You know what? We've done this. So we literally built them up from scratch. Okay. So the first day people walked 100 meters and 200 and 300 and 500. So, the progression was so gradual that each day or each week seemed just like a drop more than the previous week. So that was logical. And then the first group said, now what do we do? What next? So obviously the half marathon was next. And there's this guy, Dhananjay Yalurkar, who's in my forward. He, as we speak, is doing a marathon on every continent. So he's got...
marathon in every continent.
Yes, he's got the Antarctica is the only one remaining. And that includes Antarctica.
And he's got how many bypass surgeries?
Yeah, so I need to message Dhananjay, but I think he's doing it in the end of the year. God. Maybe because it's warmer in December, right, down south. Yeah. So in fact, 3 weeks back, he sent me a message. He's in either Finland or Norway or one of these Scandinavian places where he did a marathon to train for the cold for the Antarctic.
Oh, wow.
Right? So again, I joke. The point is you don't have to run a marathon for health or for fitness, but if you want to, then that's fine. So the messaging is very important in all of this. Like I said, unfortunately, we're a WhatsApp generation or a Twitter generation where, if it's worthy, it's got to be said in 160 characters or you sort of cannot. And the fine print matters a lot in all of this.
Mm-hmm. So again, right, so training these people, as I said, right now
Yeah.
completely healthy people are
Yeah.
unable to do
Yeah.
marathons and half
Yeah.
marathons.
Yeah.
So how did you convince the first cohort to do this?
So it was more like we came to a point where they said that they wanted to do it. You almost sort of present the idea. So they're all very gung-ho and, we've done this, kind of now what? So they're coming into the rehab program. They're on the treadmill. They are, say, running,
So did they, how did this group come together?
These were all our cardiac rehab patients at the Asian Art Institute. Okay, so they'd had their bypass surgery, they had angioplasty, and I think I got to give credit to Dr. Panda, cardiac surgeon, who's very, very was progressive to say, let my patients do it.
Exactly.
Most patient doctors, no, they can't do it, and let them do it. In fact, he's proud of them, and they're the brand ambassadors of the hospital today. And so we literally, and we monitor them. So while they're running, they got these little chest things stuck on them, and wirelessly you're checking their ECG.
Oh, you're doing ECG for all of them? Huh?
Yeah, while they're running indoors.
Oh, indoors.
But once he's run 10 kilometers indoor and he's all checked out, logically he can do the same thing on his own outdoors. So it is just almost a natural progression. And then one saw that the other did, and it was like a graduation ceremony. You graduated from heart disease to gently walking on a treadmill or cycling, and then you went on to the dream run, and then you saw your seniors, if I may use the phrase. So when we used to start practice, say from September.
Whenever I see Venkat running, I'm like, dude, this guy can run faster than anybody I know.
Exactly. So September to January we used to train them. So there'll be like 70, 80 of them doing the dream run, and then they'll see some cool guys, doing the half marathon training. So we'll also be like them one day, and they did it, and they got Venkat's training a lot of these guys, and they call themselves the Zippers Club, and they're on WhatsApp on a group, and I'm on the group with them, and they're literally doing a half marathon now 4, 5, 6 times a year. It's their social life. They go to Aurangabad, and they go to Delhi.
Venkat runs now, you too can run. He started an entire company.
So he started, exactly. So that's what I'm saying. So that's one person, but all of these guys, and they all, if you look at them, they look like the average trader you will see on Ghatkopar having jalebi fafda on a Sunday morning. That's the beauty of it. So they're not these sort of lean, mean running machines and that's the beauty of all this, right? It's so democratic in many ways, anyone can do it is the message.
Absolutely.
It's brilliant.
Absolutely. So I think we talked about prevention, reversal, running marathons later.
Yeah.
But what I'm also curious is, how did a Parsi boy from South Bombay, right? I mean, Parsi community from where you come are all about food and, business, etc. How did you get into all of this, right? This doesn't fit the stereotype of being the Parsi boy.
Yes, but they're meant to be eccentric, right?
Oh, yeah. So actually, that fits in.
That you missed the first thing. So the eccentricity of doing something different. Okay, so to be honest, actually, one of the driving forces, and a lot of this was my mother, or is my mother. She was, I would say, one of the first ladies who's regularly running long distances on Marine Drive. So
wow.
Yeah. So she. When
this
I think
early
80s.
80s mein, oh God.
Early 80s, we used to live on Hughes Road, which is just opposite Sukhsagar building, Kobe restaurant. And you just walk to, Chowpatty in about 100-200 meters. And so she used to do an 8-kilometer thing, which is from Chowpatty essentially to end of Nariman Point and back, right?
Yeah.
So she used to do 8 kilometers 4 or 5 days in a week. And then I was like 8-9 years old. So
of course, she'd be a massive inspiration, right?
So
if you
it was like,
it
could be. And she still works out 3 times a week at Key. So, she's...
The Parsi genes, right? We know she's what now, 80
she's
something?
73.
73.
She works 5 days a week.
Amazing.
And works out 5 days a week.
Amazing. Touch wood, and we know with Parsis, you're all going to be over 100, right? So that's the good one. The genes, the good genes here.
As long as it's healthy, that's all right.
As
long as it's healthy, that's good.
The Vishal Gondal Show will be right back after this break.
Shunyavan, 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 Shunyavan.
$1 billion acquisition. Another copycat startup got formed.
No, the tech world in India is surely moving double the speed of this voiceover.
Tune in to Shunya One every Tuesday to catch us talking to the smartest people we know on the IVM Podcast website, app, or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Shunya One is brought to you by Setu IMAX.
Yeah.
So you studied at Campion.
That's right.
But how did you decide to go abroad for this very sports medicine, right? I mean, people didn't even think medicine bhi hai ki nahi.
So I was always interested in sport. Played tennis in school. Unfortunately, started late in life. So I think started at maybe 12 or 13. Which, tennis. If you want to become a high level
you could
player,
have been a pro, huh?
I don't know about that. Started at 12, 13. Was a bit late to get to that thing. But there's always that interest in playing sport at a high level. And then when I finished my undergrad training out here, and I just thought, let's do something different. And at that time, the internet wasn't really out there. This was in 93, 94. Email had barely started. And we had that VSNL account, and you had to go
93
to...
mein VSNL had come.
Exactly. So you had to go to USEFI, I think it was, the USEFI at Marine Lines, where they had this big green book of all the colleges in the US, and you had to sort of research the various courses they had. And I said, sports medicine sounds like an interesting thing to do.
Was there anybody like a doctor in your family, or how?
My mother's a homeopath.
Okay.
And her uncle, her dad's brother was. So in that sense, there have been a few homeopaths.
Like choosing to be a doctor and engineer was like the
thing to do. Yeah. So those days, you're younger, so maybe you don't have the same thing. It's like if you did well, you did science after the 10th. Then, if you did well in the 12th, you did
arts
engineering.
Arts was the worst. Jisko kuch nahi mila, that they used to go to arts.
That was the road that you went down. There really wasn't that much of speaking to a counselor and checking out your options and all of that. We just followed the bandwagon.
In my case also, I was big time into sports. I used to play volleyball. So the way I got admission in Podar College was sports.
Fantastic.
I barely got 45-50% in 10th, but the sports angle helped. So did your sports angle help you in any of the admissions?
So to be honest, I gave up sport in the 9th and 10th because academics were decent. Okay. And again, we were not at that point in life, standard middle class sort of family that you can't.
Sports was
you
not
can't,
that.
because then the option was you became a coach at a club, which wasn't at that moment in time, the best career option. So
where did you go in the US to study?
I was at the University of Virginia, which has become infamous right now. That's where the riots happened in Charlottesville with the whole Ku Klux Klan rallies and all that.
So you were like right in the middle of redneck city, huh?
But Charlottesville is a beautiful town, and that's sort of Jefferson.
So you've
Thomas
been
Jefferson.
in that whole place, huh? We
lived there.
Wow.
So this is coincidentally the rally happened. I mean, honestly, in all my time there, I have personally never felt anything negative or been discriminated against.
But most people who went to the US to study medicine lived. I mean, I know so many people who studied there, then lived there as doctors and never came back to India. I mean, what prompted you back to come to India?
This question was asked to me like 250 times a week 10 years ago. Now people don't ask it that often, so my answer is ready. Two reasons. One is my wife was missing home a lot, and if you know a Parsi wife, they get what they want. So I hope.
And how did you meet your wife? She was in the US too, or in India?
At French tuitions.
French tuitions. Oh God! So in school.
HSC French tuitions.
Wow.
And then I went. Then I studied and everything. So one reason was she wanted to come back, and the second reason was this toying with this whole idea of
So you already got married before you go to the
No, so I was studying there, and towards just before I started working, I said, I'll get married on my money at least to some extent. So after I get married, I should be able to support my wife on my own money. So just after finishing studying and before sort of starting work, and so then after some time she wanted to come back. And the second reason was this whole interest in preventive cardiology, cardiac rehab wasn't done in India. There was this opportunity to do something new for what it's worth. So that was exciting, and that's kind of...
But when you came to India, India mein us time pe there were not all these big hospitals. This only came later, right? That time there were only these government hospitals. There was Tata Memorial, etc. So wasn't that a big risk for you to come, or you kind of weighed on? I mean, you just turned up to India saying, I'll dhoond lenge kuch.
Dhoond lenge, also to be, we've had a little confidence being sort of, having some amount of medical people in the family, old South Bombay network connections. I knew that at least I was fortunate enough to have enough doors that people would open for me to have the right conversations. Then where that went, who knows? And I always felt this sort of, let's take life as it comes. That's been a bit of a sort of a philosophy.
So what is the biggest risk you've ever taken so far? In your mind, what is the biggest risk for you, which you took? I know you put everything in a diary, so maybe somewhere you would have said that, aaj to thoda risk lena pad raha hai.
Getting married? No, that's a joke. But you need to delete that. But no. So again, I don't know. Not to say. Somehow, just had this sort of taking life in its stride. So I can't, sometimes when you ask people, what's this one defining moment, or what's the best thing or the worst thing in my life, at least so far, it's not specifically been that. I've just kind of, taken it in its flow. And though coming back could, and trying to start something new could be perceived, somebody sitting on the outside may say, are you mad, why are you doing it, and nobody, the doctor reverse brain drain never happened. Engineering people were coming back because suddenly it was in to be in Bangalore and Silicon Valley and all of that. But the same thing didn't happen for medicine. But I didn't view it as a risk, you know what I mean? So though while that could have been called as a risk, I didn't view it as a risk.
For example, I view the 2004 event of you getting all these heart patients to run marathons was a crazy risk, right? You have put your reputation on line. One person could have died and it could have completely, ruined your career, saying that, because I'm sure there would be a bunch of doctors saying that.
No, actually you're right. No, you're absolutely right. You put it that way, you're right. And yes, so we those are not thoughts that hadn't crossed the mind, but it just seems so logical and right to do at the time.
No, I'm saying for you, but did you think that because if that was the case, why is not every hospital making patients do this? Why is there, every doctor, like we do this thing, walk with the doc. It's so difficult to get doctors who can walk. Right? So,
no, I get it. Yeah, you're right. So viewed in that manner, yes. But so again, I guess you're right then. Yeah, we have done some crazy things, but did not think of it in that
of
manner.
Course, when we do crazy things, we don't think of it as crazy. But I'm just saying that, for an outsider.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Taking high-risk patients and making them run 21K.
Yeah, viewed in that manner, yes. But, I just, at that moment, it just seemed medically and ethically and every other way that we're doing something right, doing it with the right heart, the right intention and all of it, and did it. So
the problem right now is, and this is kind of one of the challenges. So we did this massive survey of the Indian healthcare system, and we even talked about the results. 93% people in India do not trust healthcare.
Really?
They do not trust. And we know the challenges, right? The government had to implement price control and all of that, right?
Yeah.
So we are living in a scenario where patients always view doctors, hospitals.
It's really sad.
And then everybody wants to take second opinion, third opinion and all of that. And you hear all these stories of, all kinds of malpractices going on.
Yeah.
In this environment, what are you doing differently for getting the confidence of the patients of saying, forget this, I am willing to go and, after my heart disease, go and run a marathon with you. That is like going to the trust other extreme, right?
Yeah.
Here is one way where people are even not willing to take one medicine which a doctor is prescribing. And with you, people are running marathons. So what are you doing differently?
Okay, so all this stuff that you just said, I hadn't thought of it all this while, but now I guess I should.
Because why is not every doctor in this country able to do this is my question, right? Because if that could happen, we are living in the medical utopia, right?
I think one thing is, Vishal, people just don't, I think culturally we're not a very active society. And therefore doing anything which is activity.
Mumbai Marathon ne sabko active bana diya, right? Marathons ho raha hai.
In actual numbers it's still very small. I think the trust factor, there is a deficit. There's no doubt about it. I think in what we do or in the work that I do, there is a lot of interaction with the patient. And over time, I think if the patient, there's a lovely saying, I don't know who actually said it, is that the patient doesn't care how much you know till he knows how much you care, right? So I think that we do in all the work that we do, my colleagues and I, we try and instill that, look, that we really care about you and we want you to do well. And maybe one of the things we're doing right is that ethos is trickling down and the person realizes that whatever this guy says is in my best interest. So then maybe there is a higher trust factor. I don't know. I've never.
So let's say hypothetically, and we know our Prime Minister is known to do this. He calls you and says, Dr. Contractor, I want you to be the Health Minister of India.
Great.
Tell me 10 things which you will do differently to change the health of this nation. What will you do?
So to change the health of the nation or change healthcare?
I mean healthcare. You are the health minister.
No, I'll tell you. So
you are the health minister.
No, so I think the one thing which dramatically would need to change is frankly primary health. Because ultimately that's the base. So I'll tell you something which might surprise you, that even today, though we're talking about advancement and all, a simple thing like diarrhea is a leading cause of death in our country. It's among the top 5 causes of death. Now, could you even imagine that diarrhea, right, which, you'd solve with limbu pani, with salt, can do that? So I think our primary infrastructure is sorely...
No, so the way I'm thinking about it is slightly different. I'm saying TB. We had a national campaign. There was Amitabh Bachchan was on TV saying, "Do boons, zindagi ki."
Right.
And today, touch wood, we've been able to eliminate TB from this country.
Yeah.
Will that happen for heart disease? We know completely curable, completely reversible, it's all manageable. What can be done so that just like TB, can we have 0 cases of heart disease in the country? At least
that would be utopia. But I think where heart diseases is a lot of education which is required, and even structural changes, right? So for example, you need to have more green parks. We keep telling everybody go and walk. How many people can afford to walk in a gym? And if you live in a place which is, highly concretized, where will you walk?
No, so my question is that as a minister, what are the things you would do? What are the concrete steps in that case? So you will say, okay, build more parks. That's one.
Yeah, build education. That's at school level. So we definitely have a higher emphasis on physical activity in school, but
so you're saying introduce sports and more.
And what happens there? See, it's deeper than that. It's very easy to say, oh, let's have a 45-minute exercise session every day. But somewhere you also need to then change your criteria for admitting students to higher level education, which only the exams in one particular only the marks in one particular exam matter. You have to give importance in life to this all-roundedness. So those are changes which are also cultural. So parents is a classic thing, right? You do so stop wasting your time, on the playground, come and study, then you'll become someone. So there things like, the IPL, the ISL, the Kabaddi League, those are making also massive changes because it's seeing that people, you can get into health, fitness, sport, and there is a career you can make out of it. So, as a health minister, making these changes, raising awareness. Still today, you'll be surprised that people don't know what is, say, a normal blood pressure level, right? So just raising awareness, because these are chronic diseases. These aren't like malaria, where, for example, you eradicate mosquitoes, the disease is history. That's end of story. So infectious diseases like TB. TB is also an infectious disease. Those are sometimes easier to hit than the chronic lifestyle diseases. And here's the paradox. Like you go to a guy whose forefathers, were tilling the land, and, then somebody, the next generation bought a cycle, and then the next generation bought a scooter, and now he's got a car. And you want to tell the same guy, leave your car at home and cycle to work.
And don't eat dal bhati churma with ghee every day.
He's saying that, my grandfather and father worked really hard so I could get this car, and today you tell me not to use the car and go walking. Are you kind of crazy? Yeah. So it's a lot of that embedded. It's not an easy task. So we can sit and pontificate what people should do. But
do you think Modi will then make you the minister if you are only going to come up with these? We need some more concrete solutions for you, Dr. Contractor. Come on.
Yes, sir. I think catching them young is going to be the way to do it. You need to if you want to tackle heart disease, because obesity is the biggest thing. Today, for example, in the US, 40% are obese. They're not overweight, they're obese, okay, which is BMI more than 30. And in the Indian context, we have more fat at a given BMI than a Westerner. So catching them young. Today you stand outside any mall in a city and you see the people walk in, they're not grossly morbid like you see in the West, or morbidly obese like you see in the West, but everybody is higher. So that's the starting ground. So you need to nip it in the bud. So schools,
and what can they do to
infrastructure.
change the trust factor in healthcare? What do you think are the problems in the healthcare system? I mean, you've been working with Asian Heart, now you are with HN, you're with all these big hospitals. You've seen the system very closely, right?
Yes.
So what could be changed in the system in some way?
Okay, so I'll tell you one thing, and let me defend my profession before I say anything negative about it, which is that the sad reality is that with the corruption existing in all avenues of public life, in any profession, I still believe that in India, in medicine, it is less than in other professions, okay? Let me be honest. Even the most, how shall I say, one might consider whether it's heartless, corrupt or whatever doctor does a lot of free work as part of what they do. They just do it, and that's just a fact. Today, the trust deficit can be bridged in two ways. One is that the patient is suspicious whatever is recommended, right? So let me give you an example. You go with fever, okay, and then the fever's not coming down. Doctor puts you on a bunch of tests, okay, blood tests, all sorts of tests, and they're all coming negative, and we keep testing you more and more. You might end up saying, oh, look at this guy, he's just doing all of this to make money. At the end of the day, it may be a viral fever and may just come down on its own. On the other hand, if he did not or she did not prescribe all those tests, and God forbid something went wrong, they'll say, Arey, why weren't the tests prescribed? So it's a sort of a catch-22. You don't prescribe it and something goes wrong, you'll be accused. And at the same time, there is a lot of wrongdoing done by doctors themselves. And to me, and again, this may sound controversial, one of the root causes of it is that there isn't an acceptance that healthcare costs money. And good healthcare costs even more money. One of my pet peeves with my doctor friend circle and this is when you go out, you go to a restaurant today in a mid-level, people don't bat an eyelid paying 1,500, 2,000 rupees a head. You go to a good hairdressing salon and, you get some stuff done in maybe 1,500, 2,000, 2,500. But people go to a doctor and the fees are 1,000 or 1,500. They kind of cringe at it. So they still expect that healthcare and even education, though that's changed now, should be really cheap. Because in the earlier days, they used to pay 10 rupees to a GP for the visit. So they expect that, and the reality is healthcare is expensive. And the moment people are... So let me put it this way, a room in a hospital today costs less than a room in an equivalent level hotel. What's the hotel giving you a bed to sleep on? The hospital is giving you the bed, is giving you 3 plus 3 meals a day, it's giving you 24-hour nursing care, all in the price of that room. Good healthcare is expensive.
But until you need one case like the Fortis case which happened recently, right? It was all over the papers of dengue and 17 lakhs bill kind of a thing.
Yeah, but again, this is a complex thing. So there are lots of rules which are made. Like let's take the example of even generic medicine, right? You say that, okay, that doctors are writing, medicines, based on certain companies and they're sort of making money off it. Now, with generic medicine, is there good quality control? When you are going out running, you probably will pick a branded shoe for yourself, right? And that's the choice you make. So in generic medicine, there is, like I said, there's a lot of, and at the same time, there are doctors who may be prescribing for wrong reason. So it's one of those convoluted situations where there aren't easy answers.
But the challenge is, and this was one of the most, striking thing in our research. 93% people don't trust doctors, but more people trust guys like the number one person trusted is Baba Ramdev. Okay. Number 2 was Akshay Kumar.
Okay.
So the point is that we have more trust in Patanjali products, we have more trust in what celebrities are telling us, and less trust in the healthcare system.
Don't know what to say about that, but I think, where Baba Ramdev and a lot of that is concerned, I think there's also this sort of, if I may call it, religious angle to thing, and I think Indians are probably the most religious people in the world. I joke that if you had a religious Olympics, we would win gold, silver, bronze and everything, right? 7-day fasting, 21-day fasting, anything. I mean,
exactly.
So I think that there is that whole angle and to it where it's seen as that this is good, this is from our ancient text and scriptures. There is that whole belief system that goes into it. And yeah, I guess it's sad that there is this, mistrust or distrust in the healthcare system. I think doctors and hospitals are to blame, but at the same time, there's got to be that realization that healthcare is expensive. The other, if I may use the word factor, is that there's very little government spending on healthcare. The government spending on public healthcare is under 2% of the GDP. And for a country like ours, which is not a very rich country, the majority of care should be delivered.
And now hopefully with Modi Care, what they are launching, at least
let's hope that things make a change. So 80% of healthcare is delivered in private and about 20 in public, and it should ideally in a country like ours be the other way around.
Mm-hmm. And what is your view of tech platforms? I know you must have seen a number of apps and number of kind of devices and stuff.
So I think technology is great. At the same time, obviously there is a lot of hype that goes into it. So I think in the US, this whole AI and artificial intelligence in medicine, one of the very, very big hospitals in the US invested heavily in a big product from a tech company. And I think that they almost write off 600 million.
No, absolutely.
Or something like that.
We've seen that AI can't do healthcare so far.
So exactly. And so far is the right word. So I think like in most other things, you got to kind of take it like, what Goki is doing is using a tech platform, right? And I think that's great.
And we have coaches. So we are kind of using technology
so the
to
best
enable
of
delivery.
both worlds, right? So I think that's fantastic. And I think, like using an app to, measure food or to give you, calories of each food that you're eating or tracking sleep. It's all good.
And now, we've integrated this into insurance with, our
I think that insurance is fantastic. I think you stole that idea from my head because this is what I've been thinking about for the last literally 18 to 20 years. And when I was working in the US also, we were working in a preventive health company called Interven, which started delivering services like you do at malls. That was the first time in the US.
Wow.
In malls, we were delivering. We had kiosks in the malls
preventive health
where we were doing this. And, that time there wasn't the sort of smartphone technology.
Mm-hmm. No, so what my belief is that India always leapfrogs, right? So we are going to go away from poor healthcare, no infrastructure, directly to people, everybody being on apps, people, I think soon there will be phones which will have ECG. Already they
do. I was at, I work with the larger Reliance group, so I was at their headquarters just last week, at the Geo quarters, and I was talking to the person who looks after their health thing, and we were just generally chatting. He said that the phone can actually become the doctor, and obviously I use it sort of metaphorically, but there is so much, and with the vision today that every Indian must have a smartphone in the hand with connectivity, you could with Jio or any other platform, use the phone to connect, to receive healthcare information, help when required. I think that's fantastic.
So as I said, right, so my belief is soon in a 4,000 or 3,000 rupee phone, you can do blood pressure, ECG, diabetes.
Yes.
You will be able to monitor every vital sign from your phone itself.
Yes, you will.
And you could be in any part of the country. Now that connected to a platform like Goki or some of the other platforms suddenly democratizes health, because you could be sitting in Kanyakumari or in Jhumri Talaiya, and you could be talking to Dr. Contractor because you have a system to look at it.
Yes, absolutely.
Right now, I think the whole physical infrastructure is what is creating a challenge.
And you leapfrog that. You're absolutely right. It's like we leapfrog the entire landline generation.
Exactly, right? We went to 4G.
Our mobile technology was more advanced than the US because, they had so many landlines.
So the funny thing is there are people in this country for whom internet was directly 4G. So they never knew how slow internet was. So for
and then
them,
sound when you connected on your
right.
modem.
So they are all directly streaming video, and उनको पता है हम लोग कितना धक्का मार के video download करते थे, एक घंटा लगता था.
I'm a Commodore 64 guy, so
I was a Sinclair ZX.
Sinclair ZX. That is the
so that's what I'm saying,
competition.
right? So people have leapfrogged, and I think India has a unique opportunity to leapfrog healthcare.
Absolutely right.
Where we could go from poor primary healthcare to the latest preventive healthcare.
I agree with you.
Completely delivered digitally. So that's really what I'm hoping
Absolutely.
the future to be.
Yeah, let's hope. So many, the government, everybody's talking digital. Let's hope it translates.
So what are you seeing differently in the kids of today? I know you have a daughter, 13 years old in Cathedral.
Yes.
My son is almost 13. He's at Ascend. I'm seeing this generation very different. The way they look at health, they already want to eat healthy, and so it's slightly different. I don't know what you are seeing with the kids of today.
Yeah, so one is they know it all.
Yeah, exactly, right. I mean, they're already connected to YouTube and Google and Wikipedia.
Yeah, and the challenge is they are, so like even before she joined Cathedral, we used to do some programs, and we've gone and given talks to students at various age groups. There is a lot more awareness. They're much more clued in, and they're much more connected digitally. I just hope that somewhere, we don't reach a point where they lose sight of the real world. I mean, it's not just health related, it's just other aspects. I think we, in a sense, have had the best of both worlds, where we grew up and maybe not having landline. Your neighbor had a landline, and then you got the landline, and then you had a TV, and then you had the VCR, and today we all have the world at our fingertips on the phone. So we kind of seen it all, while our kids have only seen a smartphone. So while they're completely clued in, connected, I also see that because of the phone, which is a great enabler, they're spending much less time doing physical activity.
Yeah, and that's the one thing, span is also very low.
Their attention span is very low. I don't say this as a joke. They're all going to have neck problems because they've got that
the
posture and the texting thing. I'm not saying that I'm not guilty myself, but that's just the reality.
This generation is going to have a very different kind of problems.
So where it moves, I mean, who knows? The quantified self, as we call it, right? The bionic man measuring his ECG all the time, measuring the sugar. While that's good, there can be a bit of a downside if that's kind of taken too far, right? So now people are talking about gene manipulation to live longer. That's kind of scary stuff.
No, and in the US, all the billionaires are all trying to see how they live forever, right?
It is. There's this whole bulletproof concept, right? There's this guy.
I have bulletproof coffee, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. See, there we go. You're a classic example.
It's very good, though. I like it because of the taste,
You want to live longer,
I'm going to make
honest.
it right. I'm going to make it right once.
Okay.
No, so, my goal is that, listen, if with all the tech, with all the knowledge, if we cannot live over 100 years, what is the use of all of this, right? Yeah. So I'm saying that except any accidental stuff, which you can't control, at least in my hand, it's to control diabetes, cholesterol, blood. All these things are in my hand, in your hand.
Yeah.
If I can make sure that I do not have all of this and I can survive another 20 years, I'm sure medical science will come with miracles to extend it further. So my pet point to everybody is that if you can prevent many of these problems for the next 15, 20 years,
you got it made.
There is a very high chance that you're going to live over 100. I don't know what you have to say about
I think you're the kind of guy, Vishal, you're going to clone yourself soon, huh?
No, I'm not going to clone myself. I'm hoping that somebody else will figure it out. I'm just going to make sure that I survive till that point of time.
I agree. The only thing I would worry about is that we need to make sure quality of life is maintained, right? And that's important, because there's again a bit of a fine line between kind of, I don't know, whether you use the word obsessively or artificially doing a lot of this versus just genuinely enjoying.
I keep hearing,
good health.
I know people talk about metformin now suddenly, that's the new thing, and all these crazy talks which people are doing. There is this whole thing of uploading your brain onto the cloud, and then...
So see, I find that scary stuff. Right now, you're completely a tech guy. You know a lot lot about this, I'm sure.
I am not completely...
No.
I just meet these crazy people all the time.
Exactly. So maybe you just come across. And to me, there's also this scary aspect of things, right? I mean, like everybody's living forever, then, there's going to be some downside to it.
No, but my point is that till we don't reach there, you don't know what the downside is, right? Like life expectancy, right? Look at the world now, from a time where people were not living 30, 40 years to people living average is 80 now in the US, right? Yeah. And in places like Japan in places like Italy, there are people who are living over 100 years.
Yeah.
So
there are a very large number of plus 100 in all over the world today.
Absolutely. So I think that there is no way that why we should not be doing it. Having said that, I want to know where do you see yourself in the next 10, 20, 30 years? Because you have now been in the best, Asian Art, best heart hospital, HN, best facilities in India, possibly Asia. So where do you see, what is the next level for you? You've already made heart patients run marathons. What are you going to do next? Are you going to make them scale Mount Everest? Are you going to
I want to climb Everest if my wife allows me, but that's a different story.
Well, I've done Everest Base Camp. You can do that easily. Of course, you don't need a wife's permission for that.
Oh, trust me. But no, so here's the deal. There is this. They call it the sunscreen song. You remember, it was meant to be Kurt Vonnegut's address where talks about things to do in life, where they say that some of the most interesting 40-year-olds haven't figured out what they're going to do next. I think to some extent I fall into that. Having said that, there are some concrete goals. So at HN Reliance Foundation, what we're doing is I run the rehab and sports medicine area, and we're in a lovely building and a massive amount of space given. Okay, so I got to credit the Mrs. Ambani and the Reliance Foundation for actually putting that much of space in South Bombay for something like this, where I have this kind of dream, okay, that every patient who enters our hospital, or for that matter, any hospital, right, should ultimately go out better than before. So far, we just see healthcare in most parts of the world and India is seen as, you made the guy live and just go out. You just made him well.
How can you upgrade them?
That's the idea. So I would like that everybody, whether they came for knee pain, whether they came for a bypass surgery, whether they came for a cancer surgery, whether they came for a stroke, once you've cured them of acute illness, you work with them so that they are where they were 5 years ago or 7 years ago or 10 years ago. So like this, we keep talking about heart patients and marathon. They say, how can, patients with heart disease run a marathon? It's the other way around. They ran a marathon because they had heart disease, not in spite of it. They are people who have never ever run in their whole life.
Exactly.
The first time they ran was because of heart disease. Similarly, if we do that for every cancer patient, so every patient should metaphorically, okay, and I'm again stressing metaphorically, run a marathon. Right, which means be the best that they can be.
And it's all in the mind, right? The biggest challenge is on their mind.
Where they can be better than before. So that's a big goal, to make this whole exercise is medicine concept for me, where everybody walking in is
So I call this leveling up, right? So the bottom line is, if you don't level up in whatever you do, you're not going to succeed.
So that's a big thing I want to do. The other big thing is this whole digital health thing we spoke about. Luckily, again, I work for an organization where, we have the opportunity or the ability, if somehow digital health...
So GeoHealth is a big initiative.
Can reach out to... I think million, but they think
and very frankly, if there's anyone who can do this, it's Geo and the Ambanis with vision like this.
So to be able to really do that, so that's the second big goal. This whole digital health piece, reaching out to everybody, and I would love it if we get.
So looks like GeoHealth is going to change the landscape of healthcare.
Yeah, let's hope so. So I actually was lucky enough to visit their headquarters last week just to see if there's any way in which I could help, contribute, and they've got great plans. And I think being in the healthcare field and having the HN Reliance Hospital, we're trying to see what can be done to take it to the next level. I would love to contribute in any way I could. And that's one of my passions also, this whole piece of digital health, simply because I believe that we could reach out to a very large audience across the country. I mean, literally, if the dream is to put a smartphone in everyone's hand, then it's 1.3.
And as I said, the smartphone can be the smart diagnostic tool,
it's the doctor in your hand, so to speak. So that's the second goal, right? You said about the future. So one is this whole everybody should get better than before, the digital health. And the third, which is always a dream, that India should do very well at the Olympics.
And the sports
through our whole, sports medicine, sports cardiology, the things we're doing, if we can contribute to that effort, it would be fantastic. And I believe we'll start winning many medals when we create a ground up system. Right now what we're doing, and in pockets everybody's trying to do, is pick the ones who are already very talented and take them from national to international level. And we will get some medals like that. So a lot of the people who already won the medals have come through programs such as the Olympic Gold Quest, right? But I believe that the large quantity, when you're starting to win 30 medals and 40 medals, will happen once it's penetrated down to the grassroots and kind of, all Indians are. So I'll give you a good example. We did, during the Mumbai Marathon this year, runners from Ladakh came down. And I've always been associated with them for many years. So we did a VO2 max test. So VO2 max test is one which actually examines the amount of oxygen your system can consume when you run. So if there's one factor which can identify who will win a marathon, or the most VO2 max, is the VO2 max. These guys at the age of 20, 22, 23 had world-class levels. So it means that the capability or the potential or the genetic gift, because they live at altitude, is there. Now to translate that into actually winning a medal is a big gap, which I hope that the country...
and I think if you can make, triple bypass patients run marathon, there is no reason you can't take 20-year-olds from Ladakh and make them win the Olympics.
Let's
I think if there's anybody who can do it, it's you.
I don't know if that's true, but thank you very much for saying that.
So coming to, another part I just want to kind of touch upon was that how do you keep yourself updated with all these things happening around the world? Apart from your medical stuff, right?
Yeah.
You are aware of technology and all these things. What do you do? How do you catch up?
One is, where technology is concerned, I would say I'm one of those people who is in between, so is not the most savvy guy. So I'm not completely apped out, and my sort of whole life is not run around that. And at the same time, I'm not someone who doesn't know what's going on. So, for example, I am on Twitter and I'm reasonably active, but I'm not on Instagram. Okay, I initially got onto Facebook more from a work-related education angle, as opposed to going out there and using it as really a social network. So, I think Twitter and following the right people, if I might add that, has helped me keep up with what's going on. I've had a lot of personal interest in running myself. I'm just started training last week for a triathlon.
Triathlon?
Yeah.
So you've already done, how many marathons have you done?
So half one would do almost every alternate weekend kind of a thing. I've done a few full. When I was medical director of the Mumbai Marathon, I could never do the full simply because I had to be this. But now the last 3 fulls in Mumbai I've done.
And what's your timing on the full? Like 5 hours, 4 hours?
3 hours 40 minutes.
3 hours 40 minutes. That's like, oh God, that's super fast. Oh God, wow.
It is reasonable, yes.
Yeah, it is very good, man. 3 hours 40 is like elite almost, huh?
It's okay. So yeah, that was
you're being modest,
that was So now the goal is a nice triathlon. So
wow. Yeah, and which triathlon are you trying to go for?
So I haven't really set. So I want to ultimately do the full Ironman. But so the half Ironman, I know there's one in Colombo, which is the closest one, which is outside of our city, and so that's in February. So if I find something closer,
but the best ones are in France and all these places, right?
Yeah, but it also involves taking a lot of time off and things like that. While going to Colombo can be a weekend.
So how do you train for all this? This is like literally, have you run every day?
No, not really. So if you train for a marathon, so one needs to run 4 to 5 days a week. So it's not as much as people who don't do it think it is. It's not like your whole life has to be. Absolutely, yeah. Your whole life doesn't have to be committed to doing that. You just need to be to do any of this, and you do this yourself. You need only 2 things, and it almost sounds overly simplistic, but it's true. You need to have a decent plan. And while that sounds simple, I'm shocked as to how many people with all the information available today have just bizarre plans, right? They don't even have a decent plan to work with, right? So you need to have a decent plan, and then you need to stick to it. And that just sounds easier said than done.
Exactly.
That's sticking to it, that, okay, if you have a long run on that Saturday or Sunday, you do it, come what may. Then there's no excuse of travel. The only valid excuse is illness. Yeah. Outside of that, there's no excuse. You hit those targets, you hit the milestones along the way, and you will achieve it at the end.
You need to do repeats, hill running,
whatever. Yeah, you just do that, and and the journey is as enjoyable, or the process is actually, to me, more enjoyable than the final time on race day. The final time on race day has variables sometimes out of your control. Yeah. But the journey is really what gets you there. And that's, sort of use a cliche from an Aerosmith song, life's a journey, not a destination, right?
Absolutely, and enjoy the journey.
Enjoy the
destination
ride.
actually becomes boring at times when you reach.
Yeah.
And that's what happens to all the runners who want to keep pushing and going ahead, right?
So it's nice to have goals, but the journey that you take to achieve that goal is equally or more important.
And are you into books? Do you read a lot?
Moderately. I must admit that with this whole sort of Twitter type distraction, the formal reading of full books has become less. But I do like reading. I read 2 very nice books. They're both, frankly, life and running related. One was Endure by this guy called Alex Hutchison, who writes for Runner's World and Outside magazine. And the other is by a guy called Brad Stulberg, who's written a book called Peak Performance. He had a lovely quote in that book. I'm sure the listeners would enjoy it. It's not a quote, really. It's more a formula, which is stress plus rest equals growth. Which applies to athletic endeavors and life in general.
Stress
so
plus rest.
if you don't tax the system, it's not going to grow, right? If you lift a 10-pound weight all your life, you're not going to get stronger beyond a point. If you run 2 kilometers every day, you're not going to get, better athletically. So you need to be on that outer edge of pushing yourself. At the same time, you need the rest. If it's over stress and there's no rest, you'll have injury. If it's hardly any stress and there's a lot of rest, there's no growth, right? So it's the ideal combination.
And so these are books related to running. They're
not related to running specifically. They are lessons for life, so to speak. So this peak performance is how to achieve peak performance in any aspect of life. The book.
So have you read? I'm sure you have read The Born to Run.
Yes, of course. That's one of those classic things. It's got this and this kind of almost mythical ending where the guy actually died.
Yeah, and running.
Ago.
It is insane.
Mike are true. So that was a.
And in fact, I don't know if I told you, Barefoot Ted is a good friend of mine. So
Venkat knows him, so I had he showed me his autograph, which is his foot paw, or rather his foot mark, his footprint.
So I met Barefoot Ted quite a few times. He was in Seattle. We hung out together, and now he's actually moved to Santa Barbara.
Okay.
So he's quite a character, and he has his lunar sandals which people buy to
and
run.
the 5 fingers and all of that.
And is this the book you recommend to most of the people? Because I have not read both these books, Peak Performance and
Endure. So Endure talks about how the mind kind of controls a lot of things, and it's a governor. So the mind can push you to limits beyond, and at the same time it also protects you. So this concept of it's all in the mind, it explores that to say, yes, there is a large amount of truth to it, but it's not all in the mind. Maybe it's 70 or 80% or whatever. So
and that's what it says, right? That when your mind knows a limit, it automatically stops you. When your mind doesn't know the limit, it cannot stop you.
So they've done these weird experiments where they've certain aspects of the brain which control fatigue and all. They actually zap them out and then see if people can do a lot more. There's a lot of funky stuff done all over the world to study this, and it's fascinating what the mind is capable of.
No, there's a lot of hacks like this to kind of do this. And So do you have any of your hacks?
Now that's I need to know what hack is. I'm too old to know what a hack is. So once you explain to me what a hack is, I'll answer your question.
No. So hacks are tricks or stuff you can do to simplify or make things easier, better, faster. Like my hack is, for example, I only wear red. You will not see me in any other T-shirt or shoes.
Is that right? Yeah, actually, now that you say it,
absolutely. Because my simple theory in life was I don't want to waste my time thinking of what clothes to wear. It removes one complication from my life completely.
The next Steve Jobs.
No, it is not about Steve Jobs. It is about simplification of decision making, right? It doesn't matter. So I picked the color red. I love red. So that is a hack. Shantanu Moitra, he was on the show. He talked about an amazing hack he learned. So he can actually make fried eggs on his car's bonnet. So he's got this oil which can basically fry in very low temperature. So basically what you can do is, if you're on the road, get eggs and put this egg on your bonnet, and it needs a little bit of sunlight, and you can actually make a fried egg. And I was like, that's a completely genius. There's this oil. So there are all these kind of crazy hacks.
So I don't know whether I've got something in those things.
I thought maybe you have some injection you can take and run very fast.
No. Mine's boring. I just make sure that in my car at any given time there are a pair of running shoes, pair of shorts and a pair of t-shirt, so I've got no excuse not to exercise.
That's a great hack to have,
at
right?
any given point. There's always like the spare. There's the standard stuff which is for the day, but there's the backup. So in my trunk, actually, if you open it, there'll be a a life jacket so one can go kayaking. There's a
In Mumbai too?
Actually, off Chapati, we used to do it. There's a tennis racket. There are tennis shoes, which unfortunately you can't wear running shoes on a tennis court. There are tennis shoes. There is a t-shirt, shorts, underwear. That's always there.
It's always there.
Always there.
And have there been an instance that you suddenly decided that I was driving and I have to run, and you get out, wear all this and start running?
I've not done that kind. But like, for example, if today was a running day, right, and we had this conversation from 6:30 to 8:30 in the evening, then I might, and I had to go, let's say, for dinner somewhere, I might have gotten down, changed in my car, done a 7-8K, come back, and then gone and done whatever I could. So that excuse that, because I had this thing in the evening, how can I do it? You take that out.
Mm-hmm.
So then you don't have an excuse. Then you don't want to do it just because you don't want to do it.
Exactly. Dr. Contractor, one thing which always comes to me in my mind is that, Batman, Superman, all these superheroes, if they had a doctor, it would be you. Because you have the ability to make not only superheroes fly, you can make anybody with disease fly and make it so simple. And thanks a lot once again on being on this show. I think it is extremely enjoyable, and I learned so much, and I wish people learned it. By the way, your book, The Hard Truth, we are going to give out some copies of this to our listeners.
Wonderful.
But apart from that, everybody, if you are listening to this, go online on Amazon and buy this book and change your lifestyle and start running even after your heart attacks.
Thanks, Vishal. It really was enjoyable. I didn't realize time could fly so fast. And thanks for having me, and continue doing the great work that you're doing.
Thanks a lot again. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
As you can see, we have a podcast listener in his natural habitat. Millions of years of evolution have led him to this point. He's on his way to work, and listening to podcasts makes his miserable day better. He will now head to work and use all his knowledge to communicate with other colleagues and possibly future mates. You can find more of his species on ivmpodcasts.com, your one-stop destination where you can check out all the coolest Indian podcasts. Happy listening.